Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. We're on episode 46. Last week, we talked all about Doctor Strange. The week before that, we talked all about Moon Knight. And it's finally time to start talking about movies that don't have a comic book logo in front of them. Don't get me wrong, I love these movies, but there's other stuff out there, good stuff to talk about. And before I get into that, I, of course, have to introduce my guest this evening. Returning tonight is Frank Roberts. Hello, Frank.
Hello, Ben.
So let's get into the news here before we really dig into these movies. So we can't go a week without hearing something about Marvel. So this week, Disney Plus dropped the very first trailer for She-Hulk, and Variety announced what we all knew was coming at some point. Daredevil is coming officially to the MCU via Disney Plus. So I'm excited for that. Daredevil is one of my favorites. It's still going to be Charlie Cox. Still not sure how they're going to handle the transition from his Netflix series to Disney, if they even do. But it's him, and he's awesome. Frank, did you get to see the trailer for She-Hulk at all?
I didn't watch this one. I watched everything else. I looked at all the other things, but I didn't watch this one.
It's all good. I mean, you know, we're inundated with Marvel at this point. It's okay to to skip out on a few things.
I disagree.
I'll probably bring that up later. Oh, okay. Well, this one I literally threw into the itinerary yesterday, like as I was writing it, because this trailer dropped. I think it was either yesterday or Friday evening. And I think it's a good one to. I think this one goes hand in hand with the movies we're about to be talking about, because this is a trailer for George Miller's 3,000 Years of Longing, starring Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba, in a sort of Aladdin-like story where Idris Elba is a genie and Tilda Swinton, buys his lamp at a bazaar and just brings it back home, and it just looks absolutely bizarre and visually stunning. I mean, it's George Miller. This is the man who made a brilliant action film that was pretty much a visual story with the minimal amount of dialogue. So I'm really excited to see where he goes with this more fantasy take. What do you think of the trailer?
I thought it was super cool. I'm excited to see how he weaves in clearly some of the more modern elements with what seems to be some of the more historical storylines. There seem to be some very fantastical parts of this. It reminded me a lot of like The Fall or movies like that have this very grandiose historical fantasy. And so I'm looking forward to it. It looks really cool. I'm very much looking forward to that one. That's probably top of my list now that I just checked off a bunch that I've been waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because this is also the first time I'd even heard of this movie.
Yeah,
was with this trailer, and I'm shocked that something like that could go under the radar so long without being observed. Because it's coming out in the summer. It's coming out so soon.
I know.
I just can't believe it. So yeah, that's one to look forward to. Maybe one we'll even have to discuss after it is out.
That'd be great.
So, in other more franchise-related news, Margot Robbie is set to star in a prequel to Ocean's 11, which I'm down for that. I really liked. I know there's a lot of people who didn't like the last one, Ocean's 8, I think it was. But I just enjoy heist movies, so I'm down with this, and I'm down with a shakeup. You know, I love the original George Clooney cast. His crew of 11 was great, but I don't mind the shakeup as long as they make a good heist movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Margot Robbie's great in absolutely everything that I've ever seen her in. Even the original Suicide Squad, you're just like, well, at least her Harley Quinn was super cool.
Yep. So here's some news that really rubbed me the wrong way, and I think it's going to start rubbing a lot of people the wrong way when it when it starts to really unravel. So Marvel Studios has acquired the licensing rights to Stan Lee's name, likeness, voice, and signature for use in future MCU projects. And this, of course, extends to pretty much everything that, Marvel Disney related, like theme park stuff, just about anything. And that just worries me because I don't want to start seeing digital Stan Lee show up for cameos in Marvel movies. It was already awkward when we had Carrie Fisher show up in
Rogue One, right?
In Rogue One, yep. It's just one of those things where it's like, are you really doing this to serve the story, or are you just doing it, because you can? Because it worked for me with Peter Cushing, because I've said this before, Peter Cushing has been dead for, over 2 decades. So with Peter Cushing in Rogue One, it was like, it wasn't awkward. So I just see this as a really dumb cash in. Like I wouldn't mind, Stan Lee showing up like as a picture in a newspaper or, that kind of thing. But like to digitally like recreate him in a movie right now, I think we're 3 years since his passing. It's too soon. I don't think the world needs this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit on the slightly more extreme side to where I didn't enjoy it with Peter Cushing in Rogue One. It just feels very unsavory to me, it just leaves a really bad taste in my mouth, and I don't like it. But they're gonna do what they're gonna do.
Yep. This I think there's a place for this type of technology in Hollywood, and that place is, I think the best use of it so far has been de-aging when you want to do flashback sequences with the same actor.
Yeah, it worked really well with Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr., Kurt Russell in Guardians 2. I think they did a good job with that. But I don't think that we need to be digitally recreating personalities for films, because at that point we're leaving out parts for, actors who are out there.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not really Stan Lee. It's just not really him doing the thing. It's not the same.
It feels like a weird Black Mirror thing. Yeah. It leaves a weird taste in my mouth. I don't like it.
So yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping that audiences don't take to that and we get a wonderful reactionary response that'll shut it all down. But the way the general audiences work, probably not. Before I move on to the box office update, just 2 more bits of news here real quick, just because they ended up dropping today. The Mission Impossible trailer dropped this morning.
Oh.
And it is literally what you would expect of a Mission Impossible trailer. Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, pretty much everyone who's been in one of these movies and lived to tell the tale. They're all back. You see Tom Cruise running, because why wouldn't you? On a motorcycle, car chases, helicopters, doing every conceivable stunt that he possibly can. And the only curious thing is they released this first trailer now, and it's not like it's a solid 2.5 minute trailer for a movie that's not coming out until July of 2023. So
why?
I'm not sure what the logic was for releasing a trailer so early.
I much prefer the 3,000 Years of Longing version, where it's just like, oh, that's coming out like a few months from now. Great. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Rather than like, cool, more than a year from now, that will be around.
If you're going to do that type of trailer, the one that worked for me was when Paramount released the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek teaser. And it was literally just like the camera panning around the Enterprise with the music. And it was like a year and a half before it came out. It was like, you didn't need to show anything. You just needed to let audiences know it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I think teaser trailers are for, is to say it's coming, and then you get excited about potential dates coming later, or seeing more of the movie, or kind of seeing who's in it later on. I think that's a time for a teaser, not for a full-on trailer to drop. But
yeah. And literally minutes before we hopped on, Marvel dropped the second trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder.
Oh, wow.
And we discussed this last week on the Doctor Strange spoiler cast with is Marvel over advertising their films. And I will say this trailer is very much like the first trailer in that it doesn't give too much away that we didn't already know from casting news and all that. It does finally show Christian Bale in makeup as Gore. So it's cool to see that, but it doesn't like throw a ton of like plot stuff into it the way that the Doctor Strange trailers inevitably threw a ton more at you as it came closer to release. So while I still don't think that Marvel needed to release another trailer for Thor, it's not a very spoilery one. We literally decided last week that unless Marvel is releasing a movie that is like starring a whole new character like Shang-Chi last year, they really don't need to advertise that much. They literally just need to say, hey, here's a new Spider-Man, here's a new Thor, and here's when it's coming out. And people are going to go see it.
Especially considering the idea behind the next Thor is basically like it's Thor 4 and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 mashed into one movie. You're kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll go see it.
No, they do not need to worry about ticket sales at this point.
No.
And speaking of ticket sales, that will bring us into the box office update for the week. In what actually, I was a little bit surprised that Doctor Strange managed to stave off Downton Abbey, considering that counter programming every now and then it's gonna overtake the big blockbuster films, but not this week. Doctor Strange pulled in 32 million. Downton Abbey opened second with 16 million. The Bad Guys 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 both only slipped 12.7%, so not such bad dips. Alex Garland's new film Men opened in fifth with 3.2 million and is getting very mixed reviews, which is a shame because I really, really did love Ex Machina and Annihilation, and I'm really worried about this one based on some of the stuff I've read.
I'm very interested in watching it. Loved Ex Machina. Was not a fan of Annihilation. I'm very interested to see what this one is, really.
But one of our big movies for the day, Everything Everywhere All at Once, dropped one place to sixth. It only dropped 5.5%, and that is going to be something we'll be talking about when it comes to that film's box office, because it is a whole different beast when it comes to success at the box office. Firestarter dropped 3 places to 7th with 1.98 million. Fantastic Beasts dropped 2 places to 8th with 1.9 million. The Lost City holding on fairly strong there for a film that opened, I think, at the beginning of April, still in the top 10
really.
at 9th. 1.5 million. The Northman dropped from 7th to 10th with 1.05 million. Glad to see that it is also still holding on in the top 10, considering that it is, of all the movies that I just listed, probably the least approachable film for a general audience.
Yeah, big time.
So that is what the box office is looking like. And one thing to check up on here for Doctor Strange is it has amassed a domestic total of 342.7 million. This is important only because one of the predictions I had made in my Doctor Strange preview was that it would not surpass the Batman in domestic box office. So it's getting there. It has about 27 million to go before passing the Batman. But with Top Gun opening this weekend, and Jurassic World set to open, I think maybe 2 weeks after that, it's going to be an uphill battle from here on out for Doctor Strange. If it cannot, if it can't really do it by the time Top Gun opens in 4 days. So that is that. It has, however, managed to become the 12th highest grossing film in the MCU domestically, beating out such prestigious films as Spider-Man: Homecoming, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the original Iron Man. So despite my personal prediction, it's done well for itself. And if it can't beat Batman, it's still done very well. particularly for a film that I honestly ended up being disappointed in. So that's it for the news this week. Moving on to what have we been watching. I had last week started rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender for the upteenth time. I finished that rewatch this last week. It's still good.
Yeah.
Still so good.
Yep.
And then, even before it had been announced, I picked back up where I had left off with Daredevil season 2 and finished that. And one takeaway that I just have for these Netflix shows that I do think the Disney Plus shows need to improve on is, the Disney Plus shows are more accessible and approachable to audiences because they're, much more like the films. These Netflix shows are very violent. But boy, oh boy, one of the things that I think these Disney Plus shows need to start figuring out is they need to have either longer episodes or just more episodes in general to really, truly flesh out the stories that they're trying to tell. Because when we did the Moon Knight episode, one of the things we discussed is, do they have a finale problem? Because they tend to get to their finales and feel like they have a lot to wrap up, and then the finales more often than not have been some of the shortest episodes that they have released, which just seems awkward to me. And that could also just be a Netflix thing, because Netflix released the runtimes for Stranger Things season 4, and every episode of Stranger Things season 4 is going to run over an hour, with the finale running over 2 hours. They put a lot into this upcoming season, so that will be interesting. Fun tangent there. Frank, have you been watching anything fun this last week?
I have indeed. I actually went through the first 3 films in the Candyman franchise because I'd seen absolutely none of them, and same with a few friends, gearing up to watch the 2021 remake here. That's the only Candyman movie I haven't seen, and I heard that it's good, which I hope it is, because Candyman 2 and Candyman 3 are not good. But I was watching that, and I also rounded out this latest Spider-Man film. I've seen every live-action Spider-Man film and not live-action Spider-Man film made recentishly, except for the Venom films. And so I finished that. Not that that's like a big recommendation or anything. Been checking off a bunch of movies off of my list, such as Batman, these 2 movies we're talking about today, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Yep. I'm watching a ton lately, honestly. Very busy.
Yeah, I saw your Facebook post about No Way Home. It was those have been delightful to read.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So before we get into the meat of it all, last week I had the panelists watch this video of Ethan Hawke talking about comic book films and their place in the industry. Were you able to watch that?
I didn't, because it was a Doctor Strange spoiler one, right?
No, it wasn't.
Which one did you do?
Oh, I mean, did you watch the Ethan Hawke video?
Oh, no. I mean, I watched this one that you sent a link to, but I didn't watch the previous one.
Yeah, we discussed it last week, just because it talks about comic book movies, and today I want to talk about the flip side of that, because he talks about if comic book movies are the big films right now, where does that leave art house films? And really, are what we consider art house films now just films? A decade or 2 ago, because before we just got into this sort of world where Marvel and DC kind of run the cinema, I feel like these 2 movies, while not necessarily, big films, would not be sort of looked at as these sort of films that you would only go to see at the Grand or at these art houses. That they would have a good audience everywhere they went. But nowadays, every big cinema devotes, there was the cinema in New York that apparently showed 70 showings of Doctor Strange on opening day. And
woof.
That's absolutely insane. And it's like with comic book movies taking up all this screen time, these other films lose that. So I just wanted to get your take on the video.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice video. I mean, I haven't seen it. Seems to be in reaction to something else that he had said earlier, and he's clarifying his points. But I think that he's absolutely right. And if you ask the question, these art house movies now, would they 10 years ago or 20 years ago have been what we would have called movies? I would say, yeah, Northman's a little artsier, but not certainly by no standard in art film, with so much of it just being sweaty dudes chopping each other in half. It's pretty actiony, epic-y, more than like really anything else, and that used to just be a pretty mainstream film. I don't know. I think certainly there's a place for superhero movies, and it seems to be very much front and center. I mean, with what studios rake in from them. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely say, if you were to say you can go see some superhero movies or these movies, I pick these movies pretty much every time personally, and it gets a little hard to kind of squeeze them in when they get squeezed out of almost every other house around.
Yeah, it's genuinely a shame, and I will once again appeal to everyone watching this out there. Like, yeah, there's a place for superhero movies. Go see what you want to see, but if you have an inkling of an interest in something else, superhero movies are the only thing that really separates them, apart from their budgets, is the fact that they have superheroes in them at this point. Guardians of the Galaxy is just a weird space opera movie. It just has a huge budget and superheroes. The Spider-Man movies, particularly Homecoming, it's just a John Hughes teenager film,
100%.
High school film. It just happens to have a superhero in it. So, everyone out there, like you really are loving more than just superhero movies out there. You're just not able to separate the genre from the superhero. So there is great stuff out there to watch.
A director's canon or an actor's canon can be just as enthralling as a franchise. You can attach your interest to that just as much as you can with whether or not it's got a particular superhero's logo on the front of it.
Yeah. For everyone out there who really loved the creative vision of Sam Raimi and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I encourage you to either watch other Sam Raimi movies or to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once, which also is I would argue, much more creative film about a multiverse. So, that being said, it's time to jump into these films. So, the films we're discussing today are The Northman and Everything Everywhere All at Once, two of my very favorite films of this year, of the only four I think I've seen in movie theaters at this point. The other two being The Batman and Doctor Strange. And we're going to talk about The Northman first, we're just going to talk about these films in the order that they came out. So The Northman came out in early April. And, I should say from here on out, spoiler warnings, everyone. If you have not watched these films, we're not going to hold back on these films, especially because
it would be impossible to talk about them without talking about what happens throughout them. Yeah, big time.
And these aren't, people going back to superhero films, these aren't superhero films. Like, they're not the type of films that you get those kind of spoiler warnings for, because guess what? These aren't franchise films. We're not going to spoil the ending that sets up the next big thing, because there is no next big thing. There's only going to be the next Dave Eggers film and the next beautiful film from the Daniels, as they refer to themselves. So yeah, The Northman. Frank, what were your initial reactions to the Northmen, like what you liked, didn't like, and what you just thought about it.
Yeah, overview, I thought it was really fun. Honestly, I had a great time watching this one. Is certainly the most I almost want to say accessible Eggers film, simply because it feels more like, I don't know, it's got a lot more to it. It's a very simple story, and so that's probably something that I didn't like. I saw that in a lot of its criticism as well. It's based on a very old tale that other stories were based on, and so you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, it's a very old and simple tale, but with what it lacks in, say, plot, it certainly makes up for in beauty. It's an amazingly gorgeous movie. I think it's very, very well told. I mean, Eggers absolutely has a very active role as a director in guiding us through this story. It's not just like very plainly done. It's artfully done, and I think that that's probably what I really appreciated the most about it overall. As far as favorite performances go, I don't. The only one that truly stood out to me as a performance that I positively loved was Nicole Kidman's performance. I found the scene between her and her son at the near the end, not the very end one, but the penultimate scene between them, to be amazing. I loved it so much. I love the small little conversation that they had and how it turned the whole movie upside down. I thought that was fantastic. And yeah, mostly that. You've got other questions about other parts that I could go into, but I'll try to stick to the order. What about you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just this film is a visual feast.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's a very simple story. It's a revenge story. It's, we've seen this type of thing in cinema before. We've seen it in television and, just in every medium. It's just a revenge story, but it is just so beautifully told and done. And it does feel like an Eggers film in the sense that there are these moments, even though this is his most approachable film, because it's not dealing with these stark sort of the stark sense of isolation. There's still plenty of moments where I thought, okay, is this real or is this all going on inside Hamlet's mind?
Mm-hmm.
Like when he goes down into the pit and fights the Draugr, it's like that could all be in his head. But the fact is that someone does try to draw the sword during the daylight and it won't draw.
Yeah.
And it's like that's mysterious. It's like, is there really something to that? Is there really a bit of the fantastic going on in this movie?
Yeah. I thought that the film, sorry to just jump in here, and I thought that was one of the things that they did very, very well, is the way that they presented all of these things. You have the fight with the Draugr, and then at the moment that he defeats him, you just pan straight over, and we see the moment at the very beginning of the fight where he simply takes the sword from, the dead Viking king and leaves. And you see little moments like that. I'd say were probably the one that you mentioned, where someone tries to draw the sword and they can't because it's daylight and they're not at the gates of hell, things like that, and they just sort of toss it aside because they think it's rusted in its hilt and is a worthless piece of garbage. Things like that moment is probably the most ambiguous, but I thought that they did a really good job of presenting to us what's in his mind, and then also alongside that, presenting what is sort of more the meta reality of kind of what is occurring through the film.
There's one performance too that I want to highlight, and it's easy to forget because he's in and out so quickly, and that is, of course, the remarkable Willem Dafoe, who shows up as the jester.
Mm-hmm.
And is there for the rite of passage, and then we don't see him again for the entire movie, and it's such a shame, and I get it. His character is supposed to die. It's part of the legend, but given what we just saw of him in Eggers' The Lighthouse, and what general audiences are saying about him in No Way Home. It's I would not be surprised if we have a Willem Dafoe renaissance coming up.
Really, yeah. I mean, we may be at the very beginning of it and not know it yet. He's amazing. Watching No Way Home, I was just like, God, Willem Dafoe is great. Jeez, he's so good.
And you are absolutely right about that scene with Nicole Kidman. That was the scene.
You agree.
That was the scene that threw me for a loop in the entire film because, because, and we'll get to this in a minute, because this story is old and has been retold, as Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Once I sort of had picked up on that, I was like, I have a feeling I know where this is all going to go.
Yes.
But that scene was like, wait, what?
Yes.
No, wait, this is not what I'm expecting. The whole first we jump into like, oh wait, are we going to go into incest? Like this is getting.
Yeah, that is like the only moment that I was truly surprised in the film, and I loved it. It was so good.
But yeah, just a visual feast. And let's talk about the story here, just because it's loosely based on a story appearing in the Gesta Danorum, which is the history of the Danes, a collection of Danish oral traditions by the 12th century author Saxo Grammaticus, which is an incredible name. And anyone who has watched this film, they probably didn't pick up on that because most of us don't know about the Danish oral tradition. But I'm sure at some point anyone who has taken a standard high school English class is gonna have that Leonardo DiCaprio moment, point at the screen and say, "Wait, it's Hamlet."
Yeah,
because it absolutely is, and Shakespeare borrowed from this legend for Hamlet. I mean, the main character's name is Amleth.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw this out there. I know that you have some knowledge of Hamlet, being that we both were in a show that sort of it rides parallel to that classic tale.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the Northman compare to Hamlet, and where do they differ?
I mean, it's pretty similar in themes and then different in just little plot points and kind of how it lines up. The sort of like main concept is very much the same. In Hamlet, while Hamlet was away, the king has died. He comes back to be revealed by his father's ghost. Maybe it's a vision, maybe it's the real ghost. We're not really sure. That the new king, the old king's brother, murdered him and took the mother and as his wife. And so it's Hamlet's journey to honestly first verify this, and then upon verification, execute the king, free his mother from this horrible thing that has happened. And in this tale, it's very much the same, except upon the eve or upon the morning after Amleth's rite of passage, the king's brother comes to murder them both. And Amleth escapes. His father does not. He watched his uncle murder his father before him. He leaves and he swears that he will return and free his mother, who he sees being dragged away screaming by his uncle. And he will kill his uncle. And he returns and basically has the simple plan of doing exactly that. And where it truly differs for me in sort of the way that the big relationships take place are in this confrontation scene that happened between Amleth and his mother, and Hamlet and his mother. You have a small moment. I noticed this. You might have picked up on it too, where they have the like quilt or whatever it is over in the corner that's being worked on. And notice that is like felt like a cheeky little nod to Hamlet of all things. But in the confrontation scene in The Northman, it is revealed that Nicole Kidman, the mother, the whole time apparently asked his uncle to go murder him and his father so that way she could actually go ahead and take the throne with him, and all of this crazy stuff. And it sort of like turns on its head there. And yeah, that's like the main big difference, I would say. Sorry, it meant that I had to explain the plot to both things, but I think that's kind of what it amounted to for me. And that's why I really loved that scene in particular, because the rest of it felt pretty rote, but that scene in particular was like, whoa.
Yeah, like you said, that's the scene that really turns everything on its head. And the reason I didn't pick up on the Hamlet connection right away is because of some of those huge differences early on in Hamlet. It's very ambiguous. Like, did Claudius kill the first king Hamlet? We have to figure that out before we can move on. In this movie, we know, we're right there. We see it.
Yeah.
We don't need to go through the mystery. We don't need to have the play within a play type of thing.
Yes.
It's all laid right before us. And then they have the wonderful scene where he meets, I can't remember if it's before he goes into the mound to retrieve the sword or after, but he meets he's like the other, not the seeress, but he's like the other seer who's there at the camp.
Oh, yeah,
the skull.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I was going to mention that.
And it's like, oh my gosh, he has the skull. It's I can't remember the name of the character in the Northman. It's like it's Yorick's skull.
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew him as a young lad.
Yes. He was even a jester in Hamlet. He's a jester in this. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yep. But yeah, I think it was at that point where I saw the skull. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think that was where I figured I was like, this is it.
Really? It was spoiled for me or not spoiled, but I knew it going in. I saw it in an article beforehand and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's based on the same tale that Hamlet was based on. Interesting. And so going through the whole thing, I was like, ooh, that's different. Oh, that's fun. And that was kind of like the weird thing, is that the movie was two things for me. It was being very like intellectually stimulated, being like, oh, wow, that's an interesting take on this idea that also spawned this like parallel thing. And then it also was like, oh, rad, yeah, he's chopping them all up, kill everybody. It was a very weird two thoughts to have throughout the entire film.
And it was interesting because, once you figure out, or if you go in knowing that it's Hamlet, you're certain at this point, like, oh yeah, he's gonna die at the end. Like that's just how the tragedy goes. But doing the research on the history of the Danes, in the story, he actually becomes the king of the Danes, and he marries a Britannian woman. And it's like, I'm sure the tragedy befalls him later, but it's like, well, he actually does accomplish his goal of taking back the throne in the legend. So it's like, interesting. They really did decide to go more of the Shakespeare route here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was also sad, because he gets so close to escaping with Olga and just being able to lead a life away from his uncle and just become a father. But kind of in the Shakespearean tradition, or just the sort of tradition of many legends, it's choice versus fate, and he decides to choose his fate, which again, that may all be in his head.
It may very well be. He has a vision that he has sired two sons, and one of them will go off and be a king. And so he's like, okay, well, since that'll happen without me, I've got to go make sure that nobody ever comes back and revenge kills you. I got to end this now.
Yeah, so such an interesting comparison. And it was also just, different in the sense that, like, because Hamlet was away when his father is killed, he can just walk about the castle and, at will, and just, have his investigations. Whereas Amleth, he had, even though no one really can recognize him, he still feels that he has to, he has to do all this in secret. He has to remain anonymous, do all of this by not the cover of night.
Yeah.
He can't. I mean,
what other choice does he have? He can't become a trusted guard. The best choice he has is branding himself and pretending that he's a slave captured and sent over into the town.
And then you're just missing out on just all of the wonderful characters that show up in Hamlet. Like you don't have Horatio, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. Rather than Ophelia, he falls in love with a fellow slave.
Yeah.
Completely different dynamics there. But at the end of the day, it's the classic "my uncle killed my father" revenge story, and we're gonna die here together at the gates of hell. And that was the thing too, is I love that parallel is there's that moment in Hamlet where he almost kills Claudius, but he said no, he's a prayer, and my soul will be damned if I do this now. And throughout this entire film, Amleth has several opportunities where he could probably sneak in to his uncle's quarters and kill him, but he can't, because that's not what the fates have in store for him. He has to kill him at the gates of hell.
In a lake of fire. Yes.
Yeah. So I love that parallel as well. It's so interesting to me that, here we are talking about people need to go see original films, and this is an original film, but it's just the same old story, because I can't remember who came up with the idea that there are really only two stories to tell: a stranger comes into town, or someone goes off on a journey. Because when you break it down, that's really the plot of most stories.
Truly.
It's all in the details. All right, so moving on here. So The Northman was Robert Eggers' first studio film. His first two films were distributed by A24, but they were produced independently. Is this apparent when you compare all of his films? And does this being a bigger sort of studio film make it more approachable experience for audiences?
I would say it certainly made it more approachable. I feel like there were a lot more. I feel like I was expecting a little bit more of an artsier film, and this felt a little bit more kind of like a fantastically Game of Thrones type of thing, or more of a historical Game of Thrones type thing. You kind of see things filmed in a way that audiences are very used to seeing medieval-esque things portrayed. And so I think it was absolutely more approachable, just because, The Witch is very slow and very purposeful and very meaningful, and the lighthouse is very symbolic, and it moves through everything also kind of at sort of a slow pace. This one kind of felt like it had a couple more, not ellipses in it. Well, no, actually, yeah, absolutely. It kind of felt like we kind of hit plot point after plot point after plot point, and it kind of had a little bit more of a quicker pace to it, even though some of it is, beautiful and languid. It's still absolutely it definitely clips along, and the whole movie builds to a climax. Not that the previous two didn't. They obviously did. They're great movies. But I really felt I really felt it in almost intangible ways that are very hard to describe. It's hard because you don't know if it's just a bias of you knowing the fact that he did all of that. That's how this one was made, and that this one was harder on him. But I felt like I saw it here. Are there things that you can really point to? Was it something that really stuck out for you?
For me, I don't know if it's necessarily. It definitely has more of a studio feeling. Like you can tell that there's a bigger budget going on here.
For sure.
Because for one thing, just factoring in all the extras, it's by far his biggest cast.
Yeah. Are you sure the lighthouse might beat it out?
Oh yeah, I forgot about all those.
Those two guys in the background. Yeah.
You have that entire sequence where when he's after he's left home and he's joined with the Viking raiders, where they completely slaughter that little Slavic village. Is probably the biggest action scene in the entire movie, and the biggest action scene that he's filmed. Just that alone is bigger in scope and scale than anything you see in The Lighthouse and The Witch.
Yeah, you see maybe the outside of the gates of that town in The Witch, but nobody in it at all. Yeah, no, it's insane how far or how much it's gotten bigger, how much it's expanded in this movie.
And I do think that helps make it more approachable with the studio budget behind it. But I think what really makes this film more approachable too is The Witch and The Lighthouse are very uncomfortable films.
Yeah, that's very true.
They're dealing more with the problems of religion, which apply to modern standards. And with The Lighthouse, there are just uncomfortable moments with, like the homoeroticism and just like being stranded by yourself, and Robert Pattinson, needing that outlet and masturbating to the mermaid and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a very uncomfortable film. And The Lighthouse, of course, as you said, it's a symbol.
Yeah.
It is a very phallic symbol. So those films are literally and they're deliberately uncomfortable films. Whereas in this film, there's sex, but it's this beautiful moment where, two people have, come together by fate or what have you. And they're seems to be destined to be together. And it's this beautiful moment, not this horrific thing that is a biological imperative. So this film is for all of the violence that happens in this film, it's a beautiful film.
Yeah.
And if you can stomach the sort of Game of Thrones type of violence in it, then it's a very approachable film, for sure.
Yeah, I would say.
And even a lot of the violence after that scene where they slaughter the village, a lot of it is shrouded in shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he has to go about
so much worse.
No, yeah, because he has to go about a lot of his grisly business at night. It's not a lot of it is very revealed or in plain day. There's a couple scenes of aftermath that are like, whoa. Yeah. But for the most part, it's a quick slash and somebody dies in the dark, and that's about all you really see. Not to mention, you see a lot of his rampage from the point of view of his last victim among, say, a patrol of guards. And so you just don't even see slashes. You see a couple people fall over and one person is scared, and all of a sudden Hamlet is behind them.
And then even the last scene is just deliberately lit in such a way that I love that. They we need to CG in the genitals because we don't want to actually have injuries. And it's you CG'd them in, and then everything is still shrouded in shadow that's you can't really see anything. So it's
I could tell maybe 2 minutes into that fight scene. I was like, oh, they're naked, aren't they? Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I would recommend, if anyone is interested in his 3-film filmography, this is a good place to start. If you're curious. And I think one of the reasons this film is more approachable is the pedigree of the cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it funny. I brought up Anya Taylor-Joy in the itinerary because she, of course, starred in his first film, The Witch, and back then no one knew who she was.
Yeah.
And at this point, even though this film isn't, a hugely successful at the box office, her star has risen immensely in just a few years. And I feel like she's the type of actor who should be bringing in audiences in the future. But I mean, this film features Ethan Hawke, Willem Dafoe, Nicole Kidman, Anya Taylor-Joy. I mean, honestly, Alexander Skarsgård is probably has the least star power among his core castmates.
Yeah, I wouldn't really disagree. Yeah, Skarsgård kind of
right.
carries a lot with it, but yeah, beyond that, I'd say
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be very curious to see what Anya Taylor-Joy's career was going to look like from here on out, because between The Witch and now, I think The Queen's Gambit is probably what most audiences are going to recognize her from. Horror aficionados like myself, of course, saw Split and Glass, or Last Night in Soho, which she was also incredible in. So she just seems to have a knack of showing up in all these films that aren't huge yet. Even her one appearance in a Marvel film, because it was one of those latter-day X-Men films, and we had all gotten over the X-Men by that point. Even between her and Maisie Williams could not save the New Mutants.
Oh boy, yeah, I haven't even heard of that.
Oh, it's one of those films that even before COVID was like delayed a billion times. And then I think it got like a month in movie theaters, and then was one of those sort of like straight to streaming. Whew. Which for an X-Men movie is not good.
No.
So yeah, you talked a lot about Nicole Kidman, but what do you think about the pedigree of this cast? How different is that from his other films?
I mean, I'd say it's fairly different. I think he definitely goes for. I mean, with his first film, you kind of see. I mean, you see the evolution of it. I think portrayed in the kind of part that Anya Taylor-Joy specifically portrays. You know, in The Witch, you go, oh, she's a fantastic actor. She can really pull all of this stuff in and do all of this. And then in this movie, she's almost this like otherworldly, like quasi living in this past. She's very much into like mysticism and sorcery, and she's kind of like more mysterious and almost otherworldly. And I don't think you can really pull that off with more of like some unknown person. I think it kind of comes across a little bit more that she actually has some star power behind her. But yeah, I mean, you see it. He's kind of built through his films. You've got a cast of pretty unknown people for his first movie. He's got two pretty big heavy hitters for his second, and then he just packs in a ton of known talent into his most recent film. And I think that that's probably owed to the fact that he partnered with the studio and was able to pull in a lot more money and really deliver paychecks to all of these amazing actors to come in and tell the story.
I like that you describe the character Olga as being sort of mystical and otherworldly, because it kind of feels like Anya Taylor-Joy has come full circle.
Right.
You know, she joins the coven of witches at the end of The Witch, and now she is basically, she may as well be where she left off.
Really, honestly.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see one, if Eggers does another film, because it sounds like this was one took a huge toll on him. But
yeah,
like what the scope and scale of his next film when he does it will be. Do you go bigger than this, or do you go back down to that very low budget, low scale type of film?
I read an interview and he said that something about this big is he doesn't know if he has it in him again, which kind of is like, I want the best for him because I want the best for anybody. But at the same time, it makes me go, this is a really good one. I'd love to see him be able to continue to push himself. But again, I mean, it's best for us all to know our limits and kind of work within what those are, rather than killing ourselves for art.
And sometimes pushing yourself doesn't necessarily mean going bigger to go better. Sometimes it is in your best interest to say, okay, yeah, I can make a better film on, this, $10 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to prove that to the world. Yeah, let's talk about that, because he he had to make studio mandated cuts. That's what happens when you got a studio backing your film. And he said he felt he delivered the most approachable cut for audiences, but he found the editing process to be stressful and a huge factor in what may keep him from directing a film like this again. I mean, does that come through at all in the final cut, or does it still feel like a complete story?
It absolutely feels like a complete story. I mean, I saw something where he said that we're happy with it. Me and the studio, we're all happy with what we present to people. It's not that anyone is walking away from that partnership displeased. I think when you put more and more people in a room and you cut things more and more by committee, you probably, I don't know, I can't speak for him, but he may have lost some of the agency that he had in his other films where he had more control over more of how it was presented. But I don't think in any way it seems disjointed or anything. It's just one of those things that maybe for me it seems entirely in the process, and I don't really see it coming through in the product personally. Did you feel differently about it though?
No, not at all. It honestly feels a lot like what Peter Jackson delivered with The Lord of the Rings. There were obviously longer cuts out there, but what he delivered to theaters told the story in a way that absolutely worked. And I bring this up mostly because we're in an era where, as you said, editing by committee is something that audiences are sort of, I think, starting to feel the effects of more and more as we see more comic book movies in which, you have to play by studio rules.
That feel very samey. I wouldn't say that they're like derivative or anything like that, but it's just starting to feel a little like, okay, I know where this is going. And I think that that's intentional, but also as someone who likes things certainly on the avant-garde side of the aisle as well, it does feel a little more like whenever I see something that's very similar to a lot of other things I've seen. I wouldn't say that I really felt it with this. Again, I think that they interspersed interesting things in pretty well with this film, but yeah, I would certainly hate to see an Eggers story that doesn't feel like an Eggers story, and this one certainly did.
Mm-hmm. And I can also understand the need to maybe make cuts for this film to be approachable, because you talked about how this film feels like it goes along at a much smoother pace than The Lighthouse or The Witch, but it is over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which I do think puts it at a longer runtime than both of his first movies.
Yeah, man.
So it's curious to think like what, I'm not saying we need to release the Eggers cut. But I'd be curious one day just to know like how long the original cut was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's always, a curious thing. It's like, I like this, but how much more of this, is going to work before it does start to feel, like a slog. But I trust Eggers the way I trust, if I'm able to sit down and watch, the 4-hour cut of Return of the King, like, as long as it's good, like,
yeah,
like we said earlier in the year with the Batman, it's like, came out of the theater that thinking, wait, this is almost 3 hours long. Didn't feel that.
No, nor did I actually. I know I wasn't on the Batman one because I saw it very, very recently. But no, I absolutely agree. As long as the movie is good, you can kind of do whatever with it.
So, and maybe that's a lesson. Maybe the Batman is going to be a lesson for a lot of big studios going down the road to really actually just let their directors, take the reins and really only make those cuts when it feels necessary after a test screening.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think that the cut of this film at all feels in any way like it was like studio interference.
Yeah, I'd have to. Nothing felt like it. Oh wait, that dropped off. Oh wait, that never got resolved. I mean, again, it's so simple. It's kind of hard for something like that to leave. But all the character relationships felt like they had a really strong flow to them. All of the themes felt pretty tight and well tied up. Everything really, honestly, clicked a lot more than, say, other Eggers films, just because the other ones are a little bit more esoteric. This one kind of felt very clear and direct, and I'd be interested to see like a longer cut if it's maybe goes into some more like lilty, artful things. But you certainly don't need him in order to understand the story or enjoy the film.
Yeah, and maybe we will get an extended cut of it, on home video or on streaming at some point. That'd be nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it'd be nice to see them, side by side. Is like what the way it is to do with the Lord of the Rings. It's like they're great to watch side by side and be like, oh, cool, okay, this is what exploring this character a little bit more. It's like it's nice.
Yeah,
but it's not always necessary. So my last question for this particular film is simply, how would you personally rank the three films by Robert Eggers?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty simple, but that's because I love The Witch. And so The Witch for me is at the absolute top, this one just below it, and The Lighthouse by default is at the bottom. Not because The Lighthouse is bad, but I personally love the story of The Witch. I love the way that it feels and flows and moves. It's very cool. This one also very fun and cool. And The Lighthouse just didn't quite click with me as much. Might be because it handles some of those uncomfortable themes a little bit more heavily and is a little bit harder to watch. But yeah, no. And again, The Lighthouse is the only one that I've seen twice. And so that may change the more and more I examine these films. But currently, that's what I've got. What about you?
That's interesting. The Lighthouse is the only one I've seen twice. And I put it as my number one.
Ooh.
Because it's, as we all know, I'm more of a horror geek. And The Lighthouse and The Witch both fulfill that aspect of filmmaking. So I actually rank them as The Lighthouse, The Witch, and The Northman. And I also I love the mystery of the sea. Like, so, and The Lighthouse really delves into that very well. And they're all really good films. And the only reason I think I would rank The Northman at the bottom is because, again, once you sort of piece together that, oh, this is that story, even though it's told extraordinarily well, I'd figured out like, yeah, he's going to die. He's going to kill his uncle, but they're going to die together.
Yeah. It's there's only, again, there was one time I was surprised in the film. It's fantastic, but I love being surprised a little bit more than once.
It honestly would have been the biggest surprise ever if they had ended it with them sailing off to a distant land.
Yeah, it would have been surprising, I think, in a disappointing way. But I mean, I would have accepted it, but still,
So that's it for The Northman, and I'm sure it'll make its way into some of these other questions. But now we're going to move on to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which, oh man, I'm really excited to hear your general thoughts on this one. Go for it.
I loved it. It's one of my favorite movies that's come out lately. It absolutely takes the cake. It's an amazing movie. Everybody is one of those ones that actually lived up to all the hype. A lot of times you hear people go like, oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's incredible. Oh, it's so good. And you watch it and you go, yeah, I don't know what it was. It just didn't really land with me. But this one absolutely ticked all the boxes for me. It was fantastic. Absolutely excellent film. I loved it start to finish. I've only seen it once. I wish I'd seen it again. If I'd seen it again, I'd probably be able to pick out some things that I maybe didn't like or have like qualms with. But I can't because I was just completely awash with an amazing story. And I thought it was incredible. What about you?
As of this recording, it's my favorite film of this year.
Yeah.
And like you said, I've only seen it once as well. I'm sure that there'll be some little things, but like right now, I can't think of a thing about it that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Just from the absolute shock of just every moment they threw me off guard in this film. Um, just, and I knew going into it's like, oh, finally Michelle Yeoh in a big lead role, for the first time in a theater for me since Crouching Tiger, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And she still got it.
Big time.
Like she could still kick so much ass, and it's just incredible. And to see Ke Huy Quan come back, for his first film.
Yeah.
Gosh, since at least his first big film since The Goonies.
Yes.
Huge. And of course, James Hong, like literally, shortly after this film coming out, finally getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I just love him because he's literally that actor who you probably can't name. You may not be able to name a character that you've seen him in, but it's like you see him and it's like, I know him.
Mm-hmm.
And you've probably seen him like a dozen times. And he's so good in everything he does. Grandpa.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Never mind. I know who that was. Yeah.
And of course, Jamie Lee Curtis in her second sort of antagonistic role in the last couple of years, coming off of Knives Out, where, and this one, of course, is so much more complex because everyone in this movie, is playing different characters in different universes.
Yeah.
In ways that are just so unique. Jamie Lee Curtis is this, this IRS agent in, what we would probably consider, our universe. And then off in another universe, she and Michelle Yeoh have this beautiful romantic relationship in the hot dog finger universe.
Good God. Yeah, that's kind of the thing that early on in the film, when Jamie Lee Curtis appeared, I was just like, wait, why is she in this tiny little part? And it's indicative of how much the movie, how big the movie feels, but how smart and economical the movie is with its elements and how they all fold in on top of themselves. Because you see Jamie Lee Curtis and you're just like, why is she this grumpy, dumb IRS agent? And then she portrays multiple versions of herself throughout, the multiverse. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible what they get out of her. I mean, she's fantastic in the whole thing. But yeah, it's one of those things that very early on I was like, why are they wasting her on this? And it's like, they're not wasting anything. They're very, very smart with how they make the entire film, how everybody is extraordinarily utilized in it.
And I talked a lot about how superhero movies are just, are just different genres with superheroes. This movie is just a family drama.
Yes.
That happens to take place across several universes. So if you loved this movie, maybe family dramas are actually good for you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, come on, it's like the failing marriage, the whole mother-daughter relationship, the mother-father relationship, the generational differences, it's all there. And the multiverse is just a big old metaphor for the story that they're trying to tell. They could have told this story without all the science fiction elements. And, I think it's still, just from the beginning, it still would have been an engrossing picture because they nailed the family dynamics from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that's the thing that I really didn't expect about this and what truly drove it home as an incredible picture, because not only is all the multiverse stuff, insanely fun, absolutely hilarious, also incredible on its own merit, but it is one of the most heartfelt, true pictures I've seen in a long time that gets to the center of the idea of what it is to be a family in crisis and how we move through that. And while also tackling, concepts of the meaning of life or the reasons to go on at all in times of despair. It tackles massive, heady things while also having hot dog finger people spraying mustard and ketchup in each other's mouths, and people jumping on top of trophies so that way they can stick something in their ass in order to unlock their martial arts ability. It sounds like the dumbest movie on the planet, and it kind of is, but it's also the most amazing film.
When I had to describe it to a friend without spoiling it to try and get him interested, I had to say, okay, think of this as a multiverse film that has the sort of same type of tone as Shaolin Soccer.
Yeah, that's actually pretty great.
Because I knew that would get him hooked, because so much of this stuff on paper is just like, this shouldn't work. You're absolutely right. Like hot dog fingers, the raccoon Ratatouille parody, and then the Rock universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this. All this seems like a bunch of hodgepodge nonsense mixed together, but because it's all since the core of it all really is just the family drama, yeah, it absolutely works. And these weird rules that they play by that we'll talk about in a minute,
mm-hmm.
You don't think about how, when you get to make a film like this, you get to make your own rules and you don't have to play by, what did this film do? And I love that.
Yeah. And that was something that I thought was very, is that our next question? Can we go into it already? No, it's not. I'll save it for later.
Okay. I'll actually jump straight into the next one because I kind of covered it a little bit. It's like when I go to a film and I get overwhelmed, that's usually a bad thing.
Yeah.
It usually carries a negative connotation. But in this film, I think overwhelming, and I just think this is overwhelming in the sense that I could follow the plot just fine. I had no problem keeping up with the story, keeping up with the characters. But in any given scene, in any given universe, there's so much detail put into it
mm-hmm.
that, like you said, we've only seen this movie once. Upon further viewings, there's going to be so much that you catch in the background, so many details, like, oh, this is how this universe connects to this universe,
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's going to be incredible. Like, I love that, wanting to go back and watch a movie and know as much about it as possible, because then I'll just have a greater appreciation for every moment that happens, like every insignificant thing. And it just sort of points to the fact that, like, what may feel insignificant could be incredibly significant. This is a film about people who are going through what we often consider the boring process of an IRS audit, just trying
mm-hmm.
to get their taxes done. It's so mundane, and they take that and they make it seem significant in those later scenes where
mm-hmm.
they're in the universe where she's the movie star, and he says, in another universe, I would love to be, running a laundromat and doing taxes with you.
Yeah, God, I love that. I cried at that moment when he said that. Oh my God, it got me so much. That's the thing about this film, is that it parallels something early on that she says, where she wonders, I don't even know if it's to him. No, it is, isn't it? Where she wonders if in another universe where they had not met, or where they, chose not to get married, if they would have been better off. And here you see them in this sort of attractive idea of what their lives could have possibly been. They're both successful. She's a famous movie star. He seems to be a generically rich businessman. And you see him still you see her lacking something emotionally in her life, and you see him still thinking about the life they could have had with each other. And I'm just such a sucker for people learning to love their very mundane, sweet, simple lives. It's I still kind of get a little choked up at the end of even Fargo, where they're just talking about, that he didn't get this kind of stamp. And you have Frances McDormand just sort of comforting him in bed, just being like, well, everybody uses the 3-cent stamps whenever they increase, the stamp price. So they're going to use it a bunch. And I'm really proud of you and I love you. And I'm just like, it always gets me, never fails. And this movie has so much of that, just like warm, fuzzy, heartfelt, true love between characters. And it's so wonderful to see.
And it's also incredible that they take some of the most mundane objects and imbue them with such significance. A bagel is,
yes.
the tool of ultimate destruction in the universe, because it's a black hole. And then you have the googly eyes, which are the way to, she puts on the googly eye on her forehead and, suddenly she can see with her mind's eye.
Yes.
And she sees from his point of view that love is what is going to fix all of these problems. And that final scene too, where she's fighting everyone, but using, trying to find out what it is they lack in life in terms of, emotional fulfillment.
Yeah. Just as, it's the complete reverse of what happens earlier, where you access your different lives in order to learn how to hurt somebody and how to defeat them. She accesses her different lives in order to get to what is true to these people and what they lack and what they need the most in life. And she fights them with kindness and love and understanding. And it sounds insane, and it is, but it is also incredible.
So, of all the universes you can remember in this film, which one's your favorite?
It's really hard to say, because that's the thing, is that I love, say the very simple, what we already talked about and touched on, with like sort of the heartfelt duel between the movie star universe and what we would probably call the normal universe or our universe. Probably the one that's kind of more on the jokier side of things that I loved. And I loved every time they came back to it, because it's my absolute favorite joke in the movie was the Rakakuni universe. I found it absolutely hilarious every single time we went back to that idea. I thought it was amazing. What starts as a simple, stupid joke continues as a more complex, even dumber joke as it moves on and on through the film. And I thought that was so fun. What about you?
Honestly, it's one of the simplest ones in the entire movie. I just love the Rock universe.
I figured you might.
It just distills the entire movie down to just these core elements, and is a perfect metaphor for the entire story, because you have the daughter who is, just trying to escape, and is, as a rock, it's so hard to just roll on your own without the assistance of gravity. And, she finds that and rolls down the hill, and, mother realizes the only way to follow her down is to follow that same path and take that risk with the, and fall. It's the only way it's going to work out. And it's just, it's such a flashback to like something like Sesame Street, like the teeny little super guy type of animation, and that it's just it's so goofy, but it's so captivating.
Yeah.
Just this whole, and it's really what it's really kind of what we just are as humans. We sometimes we just have to allow ourselves to fall so that we can learn, and then pick our as they say in Batman, we must allow ourselves to fall so we can pick ourselves back up. But off topic. But yeah, I love that, and I just love the googly eye stuff in general. That stuff just I think it's cute that something so simple, in design can change the way you look at anything. Just put googly eyes on anything, and all of a sudden it has a personality.
Yeah, it does. And also, it's something that ends up being so profound, and it's the way that the husband walks through life and trying to find little ways in order to make the ordinary and the mundane fun and enjoyable, and something, in order to make the boring parts of life worth living as well, or worth enduring or going through as well. I think that that's great. And the universe is one of like great understanding, and also it represents so much the turning point of the film in many ways. And I really like it. That one's a good one. I mean, none of them are bad. Even though the hot dog finger one is horribly unsettling, it is still massively important to the storyline to go to the hot dog finger world. So,
on to see people having to do things with their feet.
Yes.
Playing the piano is incredible. That's just another great metaphor for, in this world, we can't always, not everyone is able to do things with their hands, and, we have to make do with what we can use. And we also, we need to also just build a world that does work for everybody. And in that universe, I think they're able to do that better because they realize that everyone has that disadvantage of having hands that just can't do the most basic things.
Yeah.
And I can't pronounce it perfectly, but the Ratatouille raccoon, Raccoonie. Yeah. I do love that. Just I was also just, and this took me out of it a little bit, but just constantly shocked at that one. It's like, oh man, how did they not get sued for this?
I know. I think because they mentioned Ratatouille once, and she's just adamant that no, it's not Ratatouille. It was a raccoon, I swear. And then she falls into the Raccoonie universe. It was amazing.
And yeah, there's so many different things about that those universes. Yeah, it's incredible. But as we find in Hollywood, a lot of movies come out around the same time that have similar themes or ideas or plots. And this is not the only multiverse film to come out this year. No. As strange as that may sound. But as I said before, it is a much better film. But Frank, how do you think that telling an original story allows filmmakers to play by their own rules and not by the standards set by a big studio?
I mean, I think it allows we see exhibited in this film the level of creative freedom it allows. It's a film that feels so limitless in how it attacks different ideas and different concepts and how it connects to the multiverse in different ways. When you see something like even Spider-Man has to hip to Doctor Strange's rules of the multiverse and how all of that works. And then when you have that, you go, oh, well, we can't do something that Into the Spider-Verse did, where you have, crazier, zanier multiverse stuff. I feel like that movie actually allowed itself to be a little bit more open because it didn't have to constrain to quite as many rules. But I haven't seen Doctor Strange, so I don't know what they do with it. But certainly in Spider-Man, it's, kept strictly to our last decade's live interpretations of all of the different Spider-Men and all of their characters, and only they can really come back. You can't really bring in an animated Miles Morales into that movie, or else you just be taken right out of it. But in this movie, you can have animated worlds. You can have absolutely anything you could possibly want to happen in the movie. And I think it allows them to really expand beyond the expected and do something truly unique with the idea of a multiverse.
Yeah, and I deliberately wrote this question to pick on Marvel because they're really the only they're the only major studio that's trying to tell big stories in a multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
But they have rules. You can't break a rule that was established 5 movies ago. And you can't set rules that, a movie 5 years down the line can't abide by that rule. Otherwise you're going to have, audiences will start freaking out. But yeah, not being part of an established canon, it helps so much. You can just establish your own rules. And the only thing, and this just applies to movies in general, the only thing you can't do is you can break your own rules, but you can't, create 2 rules that contradict each other unless you're hoping to address that conflict directly.
Yeah,
but that's
and
it.
I'd say you could even break your own rules a few times, and you could do it especially toward the end. You see a lot of movies do that. You know, don't cross the streams. Oh God, we got to do it. Who knows even what's going to happen, but we got to break our rule that we said earlier. It's something that a lot of people use for like the climax of their film. And it's, I mean, I don't even know if they break their rules. I think they just sort of plod right on along in this movie. Is there a moment where they break the rules of the world that they set up?
I don't think so, because I think they
can just make them all. They can just make whatever rules they want from the get-go, so they don't have to worry.
Because at the end of the film, she harnesses the abilities of her alternate selves. She just uses them for something different than what she was, told she was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yep, it's nice to do your own thing and just being able to make up all these crazy rules that, like, again, on paper, like should not work. Like, you have to wet your pants to, to access this alternate version of yourself. It's like, yeah, if Spider-Man had to do that, then like what the heck is going on?
Yeah, but, absolutely.
And you're right too about Into the Spider-Verse, and I think that's also because with animation, your rules are even more limitless than they are with live action, because with live action, unless you're trying to, unless you have an unlimited budget for special effects, you are fairly restricted in what you can put on the film. Whereas in animation, you can do almost anything. And I'm not trying to, say that CGI stuff is bad or anything. It's just there is a limit to what you can realistically do with CGI, and it's getting better.
And I think there's a limit to where people are willing to go when they're presented a semi-lifelike world. And I think in Spider-Verse, they're able to take crazier, they're able to go way out on limbs. I mean, you bring in entirely different animation styles in that film. And that's something that you certainly couldn't present different styles or, like, I don't know, looks or feels to anything in No Way Home or something like that. It's just something that I don't think you could really deal with, because you've got the concept of people from similar universes coming into your similar-ish universe.
And Spider-Verse 2 also just, these live action superhero movies are comic books come to life, but Into the Spider-Verse is literally what happens if those comic books could just move.
Yeah, 100%.
They don't take away from the original comic books. They just keep what's there. Like, yeah, of course you're going to have, little symbols over a villain's head when they get punched. That's just what happens in comic books and in animation. You can do that. Absolutely. And you can probably, I don't know if they may have done it in this movie, but I don't remember it. I did read somewhere that I can't remember when it is, but she hits someone and it makes the insta-kill sound from Smash Brothers.
Yeah, it's the home run bat super kill from Super Smash Brothers. I think it's when she unlocks her pinky kung fu, and she uses just her pinky to, like, uppercut somebody. Yeah, it's I caught that right away, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." Yeah, they
Yeah,
do,
that's
and I think that
perfect.
moment even has like a starburst behind it, and is more presentational in this film. But I don't think that's something you could get away with in a No Way Home or anything like that. But it's something that this film can absolutely do that, say, Spider-Verse did as well.
So, as of this recording,
Mm-hmm.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is A24's most successful film at the domestic box office. A24, of course, is the studio. They didn't produce the film, but they did pick it up.
Mm.
Um, so, does its box office performance buck the trend of what is considered successful for modern films? And is it time to redefine successful cinema as we know it today?
Hmm. I would say, what would be your definition of successful cinema? What do you think the status quo is, more or less? I'm guessing it's sort of
Uh,
like you're kind of going for like bigger. You see bigger swings going for like franchising films.
well, in this day and age, what we consider successful, like the successful films that we talk about, are the ones that are going to get into the high hundreds of millions and up to the billions of dollars made in the movie theater.
Yeah.
And they're few and far between. In fact, unless they are Marvel, DC, or Star Wars, um, they're not going to reach that height. But those are the ones that we just talk about at the end of the year in terms of what were the most successful films. But as we've noted, for this film, it has stayed in. The only time that it wasn't in the top 10 at the box office was its opening weekend. It's never been number one, but it's never left the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't had a significant drop week over week. And that, I think, is a good gauge for success, because if you look at Star Wars, you look at these big films, they tend to have these massive opening weekends, and then they'll drop as much as 50%, or in the case of Doctor Strange, almost 67%,
Yeah.
the next week, and then they'll just keep having these big drops. Whereas this, a film like this, it's like, yeah, it's not making it, it's not even at 100 million yet, but like for a film to barely drop every week means that it's got good word of mouth. And I
Yeah.
think that's as much a way to gauge success as well, is, are people talking about this film, and are, people continuing to go see it at least the same rate that and I think that's important, because even if it's not, again, if it's not huge, it's like, if it were to keep, if it were to keep doing this, it is going to slowly amass
Mm-hmm.
a good box office over time. Box office shouldn't necessarily all be determined by a film's first, 1 or 2 weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say it's an outlier in that respect. I would certainly hope that more and more people look at this film, and I mean, I don't think they're not, but what I would hope is that we see more and more risks taken on small, fun movies, and really the concept of taking a larger pile of money and putting it all into one movie that you market the absolute crap out of and try to get those giant crowds to right out of the gate, and to just make all of your money back as soon as possible, is it means that we just get less and less movies. It means that more dollars go to one movie rather than less go to more. And as somebody that likes movies, I'd much rather see more. I'd rather see things that are different from one another. I want to see people have completely different takes on completely different things. And so I hope that it bucks the trend. But I think at this moment, it may be certainly off to the side as something that goes, oh, well, that was that, something that people say, we can never do this. And it's like, well, Everything Everywhere All at Once did that. And they go, yeah, but that's Everything Everywhere All at Once. And you kind of need to see a big old trend of movies like this that are like truly enduring in order to kind of see people maybe move toward really putting cash toward these kind of films. Because, I mean, you even look at, say, something like The Witch, Eggers' first film. $4 million. It made $40 million. You know, it's a massively successful film. It's the exact same as Spider-Man, where you take its budget, multiply it by 10, and that's what you pull out of people coming to see it. In the case of Spider-Man, you get $2 billion back, sure. But as far as like money put into money coming out, same deal.
And, you know, we talked about how Marvel really doesn't need to advertise most of their films. Imagine the advertising budget of a Marvel film going into something like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
It'd be so much more exposure for a film that does need more exposure. And then you can just, you know, I know, you know, Disney obviously didn't, you know, produce or distribute this film, but like, you know, Disney can afford to do that and be like, yeah, we're not going to, you know, we're just going to throw the first Thor teaser onto YouTube. And it's like, that's all you need to do. But then for, you know, your little film from like Touchstone Pictures or from, you know, one of their other smaller studios, you know, that's got this sort of art house feel to it. It's like, man, throw a bunch of advertising dollars at that. Like, throw a bunch of advertising dollars at Nightmare Alley, Disney. Come on. That movie deserved a much bigger audience than it got.
Yeah, big time. You can only hope that word of mouth sustains people coming to see it now that it's on streaming services, which if you haven't seen Nightmare Alley, watch Nightmare Alley. That's an amazing movie.
So, yeah. And I mean, we also need to look at a film's cultural impact. And I think that this movie is going to have a massive cultural impact, you know, in the future, you know, and I think I think this film is going to have long legs just wherever it ends up on whatever streaming service it ends up. I have a feeling it's going to be like their number one streaming film for like the first couple of weeks it's on there.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely.
You know, it might even, I doubt it just because of the way that, you know, physical media sales are dipping in general, but it could be that film that sneaks into the number one physical slot for, you know, its first week out just because of word of mouth.
It's one I'm getting. Possible. I mean, Northman is also one that I'm getting. I'm one of those weirdos just like you that buys Blu-rays of things just because I love to be able to watch it no matter what.
You know, I wish that, you know, like Ethan Hawke said, I wish that we weren't, you know, the film industry wasn't viewed as a sort of competitive thing. It's getting, you know, this whole concept of success being rooted in massive box office numbers. It's deeply rooted in capitalism, and capitalism, as we've come to experience in the past few years, isn't always good.
What?
Well, I do think it's certainly important for a movie to make back money so that you can pay the people who worked very hard on it. But you know, when you're Marvel and your films are making back more than enough to pay your crew, you know, like what are you really doing with all that extra money? Like, what could you possibly be doing with that? Could you maybe give your artists more of it? No, of course not. That'd be, again, capitalism. So yeah, I really want to see more. I want to see more movies be successful, and I think this movie, even though it hasn't reached that capitalist standard of success, is successful, particularly in the eyes of everyone who have seen it and are like, just like us, are just telling everyone like, yeah, this is the movie you need to see this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, I've been telling everybody, it's like, if you get out and see one, this is it. This is the one.
If this, and it's very possible just because they're, you know, so stingy over there at the Academy, but this movie doesn't get any nominations for anything, I'm going to be incredibly disappointed at the end of the year.
It's quite frequent that the Academy overlooks what I typically believe is actually a more interesting and enduring and incredible film than, you know, what I see. I mean, it's kind of up to them. There is only one time I was truly happy, and that was with Parasite. And every other time I've been at least a little like, oh, hey, I get it, but kind of disappointed.
Oh man, that's a whole episode.
It is.
And talk about our biggest thrills and disappointments at the Academy Awards. Yeah, we'll have to do that someday. So speaking of cultural impact, and I have a feeling I know exactly what you're going to say here. Do these films deserve a spot in the Criterion collection?
They certainly deserve the Criterion treatment. I don't think that they'll make it to the Criterion collection simply because you have people giving them basically the same level of care treatment for them already. I mean, they both have distributors. I mean, A24 is going to come out with, whatever they typically do for their films, and the Northmen same. But they certainly deserve to be preserved and moved along. I mean, they're both excellent films. It's kind of crazy how many good films came out very, very recently, and these two are definitely up at the top.
Oh man, I remember. Did A24 distribute Parasite here in the States?
I don't remember. I have it on my shelf, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I only ask because if they did, because that got the Criterion treatment.
Oh,
so it wouldn't. And they're such an interesting studio, A24. They've distributed some great films in the last couple of years. So
Neon distributed Parasite.
Oh, okay. Oh, Neon.
Okay. So no, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, Neon's a huge distributor as well, so I guess it has nothing to do with that. But yeah, I mean, I think they certainly deserve a spot for sure. I mean, Armageddon's there, and Armageddon's only okay.
Yeah, I agree. The only difference for me is I want to see The Lighthouse make it there first.
That's fair.
I think that only because I think there's, the Criterion does tend to like to look at like the earlier films of auteurs, and they do love those. They also love their films that have that classic feel. And The Lighthouse definitely feels like, it was made, in that era.
I definitely see what you're saying. Yeah, I think that kind of fits a little bit more neatly in, say, the common conception of what the Criterion collection provides. But still, I think that they make loving copies and amazing bonus content for incredible films. And I think both of these should absolutely be up there.
Absolutely. Especially Everything Everywhere. Oh man, it just
Yep.
I couldn't tell you what things are going to look like at the end of the year, but it's really hard for me to imagine that I'm going to enjoy a movie more than this.
I hope I do, because then that means it would just be an unimaginably amazing year for movies. But I highly doubt it.
Agreed. Well, you talked about this just a little bit before, but so I'll just piggyback right off you. It is time for studios to divest from single big projects and put focus on smaller scale films, because take a budget for a film like Endgame or No Way Home, use that, and you can make several smaller films, and you're already looking at hopefully a more diverse lineup in terms of genre, in terms of scale, and especially global representation. Because the more diverse stories we have to share in this world, the more quality you're going to end up getting.
Yeah, I think that's even something that Jamie Lee Curtis was quarreling about, I think on Twitter or something, where she talked about how they made, Everything Everywhere All at Once for what would essentially be the catering budget for something like Multiverse of Madness. You can make these expansive, insane, big multiverse related action, adventure, comedy films for significantly less than what we're putting into superhero movies. Superhero movies, the budget, when you look at them, feel insanely bloated. And I personally feel as though you could absolutely cut. I mean, you could take $1 million out of a single superhero film and throw it at some incredible new art student that wants to make something amazing, fresh, new. I think that all of us benefit from more diverse and interesting art. And I think that we should do whatever we can to support that. So, yeah, as someone who also just gets less from superhero movies than, say, maybe the average viewer, I'm firmly on the side of studios taking on more of an older school style of producing movies where they'd produce more. Just kind of take a couple more risks, one big swing.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, I am on the opposite side of that spectrum. I do love my superhero movies, but we are, getting to a point where, like, it's not only starting to feel like we're losing smaller films. They're out there. You just have to look. But literally, like, we just had Multiverse of Madness open the day after Moon Knight ended on Disney Plus, and less than 2 months later we're going to get Thor, and then a month after Thor, She-Hulk will premiere on Disney Plus, and then a few months later we'll have the Black Panther sequel, and then we'll have James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. There's so much Marvel this year that even if it's not the only thing that's going on in, the film industry, Marvel really is making it look like they're the only thing going on right now. They're playing their cards very well, but you're not. Marvel also, I think, is probably, they're going to start losing out on talent if talent is not brought up from this new generation that is starting to create new innovative stories. When do they run out of Taika Waititi's, and when do they run out of James Gunn's?
Yeah,
if that's it's the thing, just is Marvel, and
you even have an indie director doing Spider-Man movies. I mean, they kind of thrive on the indie community that comes up and makes these small movies, and it's only until they actually make these successful small movies that superhero franchises glom onto them and go, oh, these are interesting creative people that will make it happen. Let's give them a pile of money.
Yep. All right. It is time to start wrapping things up here. So, Frank, what are your final thoughts on these two films?
Both great. Go watch them both. If you can only watch one, watch everything everywhere all at once. But they're very different, awesome movies that came out very, very recently. And they're super, super good. I mean, one would assume that one has seen them since it's a spoiler thing. But if you, for some reason, sat through everything about them, you should go watch them.
Yeah. That's pretty much a good way to sum it up. Northmen, probably not going to be in too many theaters much longer. It's already out on Vudu to rent. But hey, I mean, you can rent it at home.
True.
So, and I think it's coming out on physical media next month.
Yeah, no, so I'd expect that. I caught it at the very tail end of it leaving the Grand, and everything everywhere still at the Grand. It's still going strong.
So yeah, especially check out Everything Everywhere, because it's, like Frank just said, it's still going strong. It's holding its own, which is something that, again, these big movies don't do. They drop. For a movie to stay as just in a consistent spot means that people are caring about it. They want to go see it, and you should want to go see it too if you have not already. If you haven't seen it and you just sat through us talking about it, then you're weird. Two excellent films, and I'm with you, Frank. Like I don't know that I'll like a movie more than I do, but I hope this is, for this year, sort of the preamble to just great cinema to come that is not exclusively our typical big budget superhero fare.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It is time for trivia, and I massively screwed up this week and did not come up with a question. So I'm gonna have to come up with one, right now and just see what I can do.
Interesting.
Okay. We're gonna see how this works out. So, for the past few years, since The Lighthouse, Robert Eggers was actually attached to do a horror film based on a popular, iconic horror character. Which character is it? Is it A, Dracula, B, Frankenstein's monster, C, the Invisible Man, or D, the Wolfman?
Oh, interesting. I know he was interested in making Nosferatu, so I'm going to go with Dracula.
Well, there you go. You got it.
Hey!
Yep, because Nosferatu, it's just Dracula.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought they were different. I've never seen Nosferatu.
Oh my God. Quick tangent then, because I think this is a fun story. So I can't remember the name of the guy who directed Nosferatu. I should, but they basically were just like, we're gonna, because Dracula wasn't quite in the public domain yet, so they're like, how can we make Dracula without making Dracula?
Oh,
and
okay.
So they got into a lot of trouble with Bram Stoker's widow about Nosferatu, but that's the reason it's called Nosferatu and not just Dracula.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
If you watch it, it's basically just Dracula,
Okay.
A guy comes to the castle, and Dracula goes off to England, and, it's like, or Nosferatu, Count Orlok. Yeah, Count Orlok is his name.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Dracula. And they were just like, how can we get away with making this movie without getting sued? So, yeah, you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Woo!
And speaking of which, this is a really hard movie to find, but anyone out there who's interested in vampires and Nosferatu should watch Shadow of the Vampire, which is a fictional sort of retelling of the making of Nosferatu, and it's sort of like, what if the actor who played Count Orlok had really been a vampire?
Oh, that's fun. I should watch that. I haven't seen it. That sounds great.
And it's Willem Dafoe as the vampire.
Cool. That sounds really neat.
So yeah, it's an excellent film. But yeah, tangent done. So congratulations, Frank. You are
Thank you.
Now up to 3 points. Both Travis and Jalen got their question right last week, so they're up to 5, but you're not that far behind. You and Sarah are at 3 points. And we're only in May, so we still have quite a few months to go. Yeah.
Good.
So that is it for episode 46. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. So this episode actually came about because I had to reshuffle a lot of stuff. We were supposed to do the Scott Pilgrim versus the World 12th anniversary spectacular episode this week, but things didn't quite work out. So I had an opening, and that's why this episode exists. But Scott Pilgrim will be coming next week. That is, well, I won't make any promises, but that is the plan. So, Frank, thank you for joining me on this interlude of an episode that interrupting the regularly scheduled programming. But it was great to finally talk about these two films that I do think are two of the best of the year. That, again, I didn't actually say the title of the episode here yet, but it is Norse Legends, Multiverses, and Not a Comic Book in Sight was the title of the episode.
Oh, nice.
Because it's, these things can exist without the comic book genre to back them up. So thank you for joining me on this episode, Frank. Hope to see you again soon.
Yeah. And thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you everyone out there for watching. Get out there to the cinemas. See what you want to see, but do give these movies a chance if they are still playing near you and you're not turned off by the violence in the Northmen. And that's it, everyone. Have a good day.